here from Talkingbass. Today we're going to look at some walking bass, specifically a bass line over the popular jazz chord progression Sweet Georgia Brown. Now this week sees the release of the new Walk That Bass book over at Talkingbass, which features 30 pre-composed walking bass lines over popular tunes for you to learn and study. I've written all of these lines from an educational perspective so you work through them in a progressive step-by-step manner. The book also features a complete section devoted to functional harmony, scales, chord tones and vocabulary, so you'll have lots of theory knowledge to add to your walking bass practice. There's also a set of play-along practice tracks at multiple tempos to aid in your practice, and there's also a 1-hour mini video course providing tips on how to use the book, as well as a demonstration of studying one of the tunes and learning 2 of the bass lines by myself. Today's video is taken from the 7th video in the course, in which I work through a walking line spanning multiple fretboard positions. The book is released tomorrow, so check out the link in the description below, and without further ado, let's get into it. So now let's fast forward to Sweet Georgia bassline number 6, in which we'll be working in all positions. So the bassline sounds like this. So again, we begin with those first 4 bars of F7, and the line looks like this. So we're moving from the F7 to the B flat 7. So we're hanging around on F7 and then leading into the B flat 7. So this bass line here is all based around the F7 arpeggio. So we've got the F7 working up, and we're actually working up on the A string there from the 5th to the 7th. So we've got F, A, C, and then the E flat, which allows us to make a position shift up to the F here at the 8th fret of the A string. So okay, so again, that's going to be more vocabulary. You're learning a different fingering for that F7, because you might normally, play it all down here. But in order to make this move up to this F, we're shifting using that 5th to the 7th there, 3rd fret to the 6th fret, that is. It's the 5th and the flat 7 of the chord, which allows us to move up. Okay, and then we just play the arpeggio up at the top. So F, A, C, E flat, F. This is where knowing your arpeggios and your scales, practicing them, playing etudes around them, this is where that comes in handy, because you'll have the physical ability and the muscle memory of playing through those patterns to actually just whip up through that arpeggio. Then we have a very popular walking line coming down. So we're walking down through this F mixolydian, but we're adding this flat 6 into the mix. So it's going to be root, flat 7, normal 6, the major 6 there, and then to the minor 6th. And that's going to lead us chromatically into the C. So it's actually a chromatic passing note between the 6th and the 5th. But you'll see that a lot. You'll see it described as a bebop scale sometimes. It adds an extra note in there, which makes the 4/4 work out, in terms of the actual 4 beats in the bar. Instead of coming down and landing on a 4th or something that's a little bit more dissonant, we actually are able to land on that 5th of the chord on beat 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay? Chromatic note leading into that 5th. So and, even if all of that, this chromatic melodic devices, all of that stuff sounds, like I've said, convoluted, just learn the line and you'll get to hear it. You'll hear how that sounds, regardless of the theory behind it, and you'll see that it works. After the C, we continue down to the B flat, and then we've got that chromatic approach that we saw in the 2 feel leading into the B flat. It's just that this time it's within a 4-field walking line. So that's going to be 6th, 7th, and then 8th fret. So that's going to be the A flat, the A natural into the B flat. So it leads nicely into that B flat, and in effect we've actually kind of got a bit of an enclosure around that B flat. We're approaching it from above and then kind of skidding to a halt on that A flat and coming back. It's like we've skidded down into it and then here we come back. So now for the B flat, here we are at the 8th fret of the D string, and we're actually going to work up through the scale. So B flat, C, D, so root, 2nd, 3rd. Then we're going to jump up to the 5th, the F there at the 15th fret of the D string. So, and then we can jump all the way up to the B flat at the 15th fret of the G string. Then when we reach that B flat, we come down with that same bit of vocabulary that I talked about earlier, where we come down through the scale and then add that chromatic passing note leading into the 5th, that little bebop scale thing. Okay, we played it down here. So, and then we just continue down all the way down to that B flat. So again, this is where learning your scales in different ways, learning different fingerings for it. Instead of just working across all the time, actually being able to play up one string and then coming down, playing major scales on 2 strings. So, you'd normally learn them on 3 strings. You can learn them on 2 strings. You can learn them on 1 strings. You can start them on different fingers. Learning all of those different permutations, it all helps, because then you're just never going to be stuck. No matter where you are, you're always going to have something under your fingers. So we're coming up, down, and now we can just continue down, leading into the E flat there at the 6th fret of the A string. So we're down below that B flat, we just come down that Mixolydian scale again. So A flat, G, F, and down into the E flat. So once you get to the B flat, think root notes. Always keep in mind where the root note is. You can keep your bearings better. So there, but then we're continuing down below that root note. So if you were to take that B flat there and think of a descending B flat Mixolydian, that's what we're doing, but we're finishing at the E flat. So okay. So now let's put those 2 bars together. Flat. So now we're on the E flat 7 and we continue our descent. E flat, D flat, and then down to B flat. So we're just working down through the chord tones here. And then we have this little move from the F sharp to the G. So the G natural is the 3rd of E flat 7. So it's that G down here. And we're approaching it from a half step below. So it's just 1 fret below. We've got the F sharp leading into it, which gives us that cool little funky kind of bluesy sound that, So we've got that kind of sound. Then we come up again through the 5th of the chord, so that B flat, and then we've got the chromatic approach that we've already used a few times, leading into the root note. So that's the D flat to the D to the E flat. See how learning this vocabulary, just learning these little phrases, these little ways of approaching into root notes or like the half step into the 3rd, it all just assimilates into your vocabulary. So. And then we're going to come up a little bit of a different way up through the E flat Mixolydian scale. So we're going to come up the root, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 5th, and then jump up to the E flat up at the top there on the G string, and then just come down through the E flat Mixolydian, leading us into the A flat. So root, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and then down through the scale from the top E flat at the 8th fret of the G string. And we're back at the A flat. So now let's put all of those bars together. So for the final 4 bars of this section, we have... So we're on that A flat there at the 6th fret of the D string, and we're going to be leading into the E flat at the 6th fret of the A string. So how are we going to make that move? Well, we come down, root, then we've got the 6th, okay, so that gives us a certain sound. It's not a chord tone, but it's basically an approach note into the 5th. And you'll see that a lot in Motown tunes. That 6th, you'll hear it all the time. So it's basically a little neighbor note for the 5th, but you could also see it as making use of an A flat 6, which is just an expansion on a triad, but don't worry about all that for now. So we're just approaching that 5th, okay? So it's basically a root 5th, but we're approaching the 5th. And then, because we're on the E flat, you know, we're approaching the E flat chord, but we're on the E flat. We've got one more note to take care of in there. We can just drop to that half step below it and back. So think of that line there as being a root 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've put a little approach from above into the 5th. But we need to get to the E flat, so then we just use a half step, little chromatic approach back into it. So see how when you break it down analytically, it can make a lot more sense rather than just being some, you know, random pattern. You know, if you can see what's actually going on there, it's a lot easier to memorize. Then we've got to get from the E flat down to the A flat, so we're using basic chord tones. We're coming down through the E flat 7, okay? So E flat, D flat, B flat, G, root, flat 7, 5th, 3rd, descending arpeggio, which leads us nicely into the A flat. So some of these lines, you know, it's not chance, some of these lines you'll start to learn different ways of moving smoothly from one chord to the next, certain chord movements, that E flat down to the A flat, that chord 5 to chord 1, you know, learning different ways of approaching it. Yes, you could approach it down by scale, you know, or you could, you know, approach it, you know, use the flat 7 and then some chromatic approaches, but with this one we're just coming down through the arpeggio, and it just leads us nicely back up into the A flat. So, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So we're just coming down through the arpeggio. It's just a different way of doing it. Then we need to get from the A flat to the C. So we're using the A flat major scale here. So how do we get from that chord 1 to the chord 3? Well, we can't just come up through the scale. We can't use a chromatic note in there. So what do? Well, we can play root note, drop down to the 7th, root note again, 2nd, and there we are. Nice smooth movement. You're always wanting to look for smooth ways of getting from one chord to the next. So, root, 7th, root, 2nd, 3rd. Then we want to get from the C to the F, but we're going to be moving up the neck, up to this F here at the 8th fret, so 3rd fret up to the 8th fret. How are we going to do it? Well, it's movement by 4th, C to F, so we've got that little bit of vocabulary that is going to come up time and time again in these bass lines, that little chromatic run up to it. So we've got the root, the 2nd, minor 3rd, major 3rd, 4th. There it is. And like I said, you can just see that as, you know, 3 frets or 3 half steps from below the target. So we're looking for this F. We're just running up to it there, but starting on the C. So we could have also played it across the strings with that very popular pattern. It's just a pattern, and you're going to see it time and time again. So let's put all of that together. Like I said, it's a little bit harder to memorize these walking lines when you've got lots of quarter notes there. But if you look at it analytically, you know the chords that you're working through, you know where you're aiming for, and you can see them as, you know, connections. You know, you see these waypoints, you see the connections, you see the vocabulary. It becomes a lot easier. So again, don't rush the learning process. Take your time. Take 2 or 4 bars in a chunk. look at them in isolation at a slow tempo, and then build up to speed. Then add another chunk, and so on. Eventually, you can play along to the tracks and work on each tempo in turn. Like I said, I'm only covering the A section here. So let's have a listen to a few bars at 100 beats per minute. Now 140 beats per minute. And finally, 170 beats per minute. After studying all 6 bass lines for this tune, you will know that chord progression on a much deeper level. You'll be able to recite it, and you'll have a set of examples to guide you in creating your own bass lines over that same set of changes. Analyze the notes, look for arpeggios, scales, melodic devices such as passing notes and approach notes. Look for repeating phrases and look to develop your own vocabulary.